Welcome to our next session together. This is part 1. Why should we read God's Word? We need to hear and read God's Word not because we can, but because we must. It's an act of obedience. It is an act of love and worship. It is a command from God to know Him, and it is our primary purpose. The whole point of our existence is to bring pleasure to God. Now, some people will agree with those statements, some wouldn't perhaps. But this is what our study is about. Primarily, to begin with, obedience. Not a word that many people like today. The best way to get to know God is to read His Word. All things flow from God's Word. Worship, prayer, and other acts of corporate activity and works within a church or its fellowship are pointless unless the Word is known and treasured and the foremost place. God's Word must be preached and studied. Failure to do so will bring dire consequences on whatever fellowship or whatever activity takes place within an institution or a church. During these studies, we'll be examining passages from the Old and New Testaments in an attempt to establish the need for God's Word in our lives and provide tools for you so that you're able to examine His Word and nurture yourselves to become self-feeders from the well of life, as well as sharing and growing together. Now, our first passage comes from Deuteronomy 32 verses 46 and 47. It says this: "Take to heart all the words I have solemnly declared to you this day, so that you may command your children to obey carefully all the words of this law. They are not just idle words for you, they are your life. By them you will live long in the land you're crossing the Jordan to possess." Now, I don't know if you remember from a previous session that we had together, we need to ask some basic questions regarding this text. Now, if you don't remember them, the questions are: who wrote it? Why was it written? When was it written? What comes before and what comes after the text? Where was the location and who are the main characters of the text? We must always put the text into context. Otherwise, it becomes a pretext. We should never use it out of context. I'm sure we've all been gone along to a sermon or at times exhibition in God's house, and where somebody's got up and read out a particular text and talked something completely different, which has no reality or basis upon the text that has been read, and this does us no good, and it does no good the person that's actually bringing that message. To discover what this Bible passage is saying to us, and is it relevant to our own situation, we have to ask those questions. What is the context of the text? Now, the questions to ask are: who wrote the book of Deuteronomy? What does Deuteronomy mean? Because that'll help us. Why was the book written? When was the book written? What lies before and after the text? What is the location of the actual happenings? The context of the text is important as it gives the text its meaning. It indicates its purpose and provides the basis of understanding of what is said inside and out of it, and what God would then like to say to us regarding it. Taking text out of context can distort what God is saying and mislead those who are reading or listening to it. It's especially important when God's Word is preached. Many base their sermons on a text which have no relevance to what they are saying. They use the text as a vehicle for what they want to say rather than what God desires or wishes to communicate to us. So let's have a look at some of these questions. Now, the book of Deuteronomy was written to review and explain God's work with His people and encourages a renewed commitment to God. This commitment is prompted by God's love and blessings. It is expressed through loyalty and obedience. Deuteronomy explains repeatedly that God's way is the only true way to give life, and no other would do. It continues in Deuteronomy 30 verses 19 to 20. This day I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God. Listen to his voice and hold fast to him. For the Lord is your life, and he will give you many years in the land he swore to give to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now Deuteronomy was delivered by Moses shortly before he died. He commissioned Joshua as the next leader as God's people. The book of Deuteronomy contains Moses' addresses to the people of Israel in Moab, on the very edge of the promised land. Deuteronomy was probably the book of the law found by Joshua, which prompted widespread religious reform. That's in 2 Kings. Now Deuteronomy means second law. And if we read Deuteronomy 6:4-5, it says this: Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. Now this is a basis of perhaps one of our questions during the study itself. Do you love the Lord your God? And do you care for him? And do you love him in this way? Well, let's get him back to our initial question. So who wrote the book? Now Moses. We haven't got time really to look at Moses in any detail, because it would take probably a good year to go through the whole of his life. The place, well, the location, it took place at the very edge of Canaan. The events are recorded or spoken of a period of 40 days. Interesting, isn't it, that we have that sort of mention here. Time and timings. Perhaps in this country we would say it took a fortnight. The Israelites have these sort of sayings about periods of time, and generally it's 40 days. There are certain junctures in our lives when we need counsel. Deuteronomy is a book of counsel to the people who are making a great transition in their lives. They are being asked to make a leap of faith. So to summarize, the book of Deuteronomy is written or spoken by Moses shortly before his death. The location was at the very edge of Canaan, the land which God had promised the descendants of Isaac, Jacob, and Abraham. The words are given over a period of 40 days, and Moses is then to die once he has spoken all that he has been prepared to be spoken before the people of God. And after that, then they would cross into the promised land. Moses could see the land before him, but because of his disobedience, he could not enter it. This is the context of any of the words from this book. If any verse is read out or expounded within the church or its fellowship, the text given has to have these discoveries in mind. God was not specifically talking to us in this text. He was talking to the Hebrew nation, who spoke a different language, who saw and understood the word differently, who did not think as we do, and their experience of life was markedly different from our own. Now perhaps we can then look at the text in a little bit more detail. The first few words: take to heart all the words I have solemnly declared. I wonder if you understand what the Jewish people would understood as heart. Heart, in addition to the usual meaning, the Hebrews believed the heart was the place of thought, will, and decision. We have a particular song, Open the Eyes of My Heart, Lord. Perhaps now, with that description, it makes sense, because how could a heart have eyes? Without God, however, the heart is wicked and selfish. I wonder how you would describe your heart, and how God would describe it also. So, thinking about that, and within that context, who wrote these words? Take to heart all the words I have solemnly declared. What does solemnly mean? And what does declared mean? Solemnly is given full attention to. God has given himself and Moses fully to the situation in which the Jewish nation find themselves. Moses had led the nation for decades. God has led and nurtured them and has prepared them. Declared, made known, telling good news and told fully. Moses is saying, I am telling you everything and keeping nothing back, because this is what God is telling him to do. So, with all that in our minds, so take to heart all the words I have solemnly declared. So these first few words, what are they saying to us? God has given all of himself and Moses fully to the situation of the Jewish nation. God is saying, take to your minds, your souls, your thoughts, everything that you are, the words that I am about to speak to you. These words are inspired by God through Moses. They should must and have a profound and dramatic impact on their lives, or their lives will falter and fail. At this point, we'll take a pause in our study.